Hey everyone. Tonight we begin in a rattling freight car, barreling through a wasteland of mud and barbed wire, where each breath tastes of fear and each heartbeat echoes like a distant gunshot. You've seen photos of emaciated figures behind barbed fences, heard the chilling roll calls at dawn and dusk. But the real concentration camps, they were a symphony of silence, orchestrated by bureaucracy. Each order stamped on paper as ruthlessly as any bullet. This isn't just a chapter in World War II history, it's ideology distilled into guard towers, humanity measured in striped uniforms, and hope traded for a single crust of bread. If unearthing history's darkest truths helps you unwind, please like and subscribe. And hey, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what memory still haunts your dreams? Now draw the curtain tight. Let the flicker of a single bulb guide you. And walk with me through the gate, where every shadow holds a story begging to be heard. The year is 1933. Imagine a landscape, not unlike any other in the German countryside, yet subtly changing. You feel a prickle on the back of your neck as you observe a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the air, a tension that hums beneath the surface of everyday life. This is where the story truly begins, not with a bang, but with the measured, deliberate steps of men in power, crafting blueprints in sterile offices. You see the first strands of barbed wire unspooling, glinting dully in the morning sun, encircling an old, abandoned factory, its brick walls rising stark against the sky. This is Dachau, near Munich, the very first. It wasn't built as a place of screaming and immediate slaughter, but as a prototype, a chilling experiment in control. Its initial purpose was to isolate, to re-educate those who dared to whisper dissent: the communists, the political dissidents, anyone whose thoughts strayed from the prescribed path. As the months turn into years, you witness the subtle, yet relentless, consolidation of power. By 1934, a shadowy figure emerges: Heinrich Himmler, with his elite SS taking full, uncompromising control of this fledgling camp system. You can almost hear the soft rustle of official documents being signed. Feel the weight of a new, absolute authority settling over these desolate plots of land. These weren't haphazard creations. They were meticulously planned, bureaucratically sanctioned. And in 1935, the Reich government, with cold, calculating precision, formally allocated funds. You can almost picture the ledgers, the columns of numbers. Each digit a nail hammered into the coffin of freedom. Money flows, fueling expansion, transforming the initial isolated prisons into a sprawling, interconnected network. You feel the growth, an insidious tendril reaching across the land. From Dachau, the idea spreads like a quiet, creeping vine. You see construction crews working with grim efficiency, the clang of hammers, the rhythmic thud of posts being driven into the earth. More camps rise, each one a testament to an escalating hunger for order and control, expanding rapidly through the years leading up to 1945. It's a silent, relentless process, a gradual tightening of the noose. The initial whispered protests fade, replaced by the low hum of machinery and the distant, almost unheard, cries of those already trapped within. You are a silent observer, feeling the chill radiating from these places, knowing that this quiet beginning will soon erupt into something far more monstrous than anyone could yet imagine. The fences, initially just wire and wood, are growing taller, stronger, casting longer shadows over the European landscape, preparing to swallow millions whole. You stand at the edge of this chilling reality, trying to reconcile what you know with what you observe. When these concentration camps were first conceived, their architects spoke of re-education, of isolation for political adversaries. You hear the echoes of their carefully crafted rhetoric. They weren't designed to kill, but simply to incarcerate, to concentrate undesirable elements, to contain them, to break their spirit through forced conformity. It was a subtle weapon, meant to strip away identity, to silence dissent, to mold minds. Yet, as you look closer, you begin to see the cracks in this carefully constructed facade, the insidious decay that sets in almost immediately. You feel the slow, creeping dread as you witness the inevitable consequences of such an ideology. The camps swell with an ever-increasing tide of humanity. Overcrowding becomes a suffocating reality. Imagine standing shoulder to shoulder, the very air thick with the scent of too many bodies, too little space. You feel the press of strangers, the warmth of their breath on your neck, the desperate need for just one more inch of personal space. Food rations dwindle to meager. Watery portions, a thin, flavorless soup, a crust of stale, brittle bread. You feel the gnawing ache in your own stomach, the perpetual emptiness that drains all strength. Malnutrition sets in, not as a sudden blow, but as a slow, insidious thief, stealing vitality, 1 calorie at a time. Your bones begin to protrude, your skin grows taut over your frame, and every movement becomes an effort. And then, the invisible enemy disease. You smell it first, the acrid stench of unwashed bodies, the putrid odor of overflowing latrines, the sweet, sickly smell of sickness. Lacking even the most basic sanitation, the camps become breeding grounds. Typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis. They sweep through the barracks like an unseen reaper. You hear the rasping coughs in the night, the moans of the feverish, the quiet, almost resigned sounds of bodies giving up their fight. Medical care is a cruel joke, non-existent, or dispensed with an indifference that chills you to the bone. You witness the men and women forced into back-breaking labor, their emaciated bodies pushed beyond human endurance. They haul rocks, dig ditches, build factories for the very regime that imprisons them, all without the sustenance or rest needed to survive. You feel the tremor in your own muscles, the burn in your lungs, as if you too are pulling an invisible load. What began as incarceration slowly, deliberately, transforms into a macabre dance with death. Millions perished, not in grand, orchestrated executions initially, but through a slow, agonizing process of neglect. It was systemic brutality, a cold, calculated starvation of body and spirit. You see the hollowed eyes, the whispered prayers, the quiet resignation as life slowly, painfully, ebbs away. The purpose was indeed incarceration, but the brutal reality was a planned, passive genocide, a deliberate policy of attrition that turned human beings into expendable resources, leaving them to die from the very conditions imposed upon them. It is a chilling reminder of how easily a system can twist, how quickly purpose can deform into pure, unadulterated cruelty. Close your eyes for a moment and try to imagine the transition. The moment when your known world vanished. You are no longer in your home, on your street, but thrust into a new, terrifying reality. The journey begins with a sudden, jarring change. You find yourself among hundreds, perhaps thousands, herded like livestock. The air crackles with fear, with confusion, with the harsh bark of commands. And then, the cattle cars. Not passenger trains, but freight cars, once used for transporting animals or goods. You are crammed inside, shoulder to shoulder, stomach to back, so tightly packed that even breathing feels like a communal effort. The door clangs shut with a definitive, echoing finality, plunging you into a sudden, suffocating darkness. You feel the rhythmic sway and rumble of the train, a sound that becomes both a lullaby and a torment. Days stretch into weeks, measured only by the changing light that filters through the tiny, grimy vents, or the occasional jolt of a stop. There are no seats, only the rough wooden floor beneath you, splinters digging into your skin. You cannot lie down, cannot stretch your legs. Every muscle aches, every joint screams in protest. The air grows heavy, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, of fear, of waste. There are no toilets, just a bucket, if you are fortunate, in a corner, quickly overflowing, filling the cramped space with an unbearable stench. Hunger gnaws at your insides, a constant, dull ache that eclipses all other sensations. Thirst becomes a burning inferno in your throat, your lips cracked and dry. You find yourself licking condensation from the cold metal walls or begging for a few drops of water, often denied. You witness the toll this journey takes, not just on yourself, but on those around you. The strong grow weak, the weak begin to fail. You see the glazed eyes, the pale faces. You hear the quiet whimpers, the last, shallow breaths. Some simply collapse, their bodies slumping against yours, their life force slowly ebbing away. You watch, helpless, as a fellow human being. Perhaps someone you knew, perhaps a stranger who shared a few whispered words with you hours ago, slips away into the silence. You feel the chilling proximity of death, its cold breath on your neck. When the train finally jolts to a stop, the doors are wrenched open, revealing blinding sunlight after days in darkness. The air outside is crisp, but you are too weak to appreciate it. Bodies, stiff and lifeless, are unloaded alongside the living, tossed aside like so much refuse. The psychological torment of watching others perish, of knowing your turn could be next, leaves an indelible scar on your soul. A wound that no amount of time could truly heal. This journey is not just a passage from one place to another. It is the first brutal lesson in dehumanization, a stripping away of dignity that prepares you for the world you are about to enter. The moment the doors of the cattle car creak open, a harsh light assaults your eyes, and a cacophony of shouts, barks, and commands pierces the air. You are pushed, jostled, forced out onto a platform that stretches endlessly. The air is cold, sharp, carrying the faint, unsettling scent of ash and fear. This is it. You have arrived. But this arrival is not one of welcome or relief. It is a violent tearing away of everything you once were. You feel the immediate, brutal efficiency of the system. Families, who clung together through the nightmare journey, are ripped apart. Men are shoved one way, women another. Children, bewildered and crying, are separated from their mothers. The heart-wrenching screams echoing in the vast, open space. You see the desperate glances, the outstretched hands, the silent promises of reunion that you instinctively know will never be kept. It is a calculated act, designed to sever the last threads of human connection, to isolate each individual. You are no longer a son, a daughter, a parent, a spouse. You are just a body to be processed. Then comes the confiscation. Your worn suitcase, clutched tight through the journey, is snatched away. Your precious family photograph, hidden deep in a pocket, is discovered and discarded. The watch your father gave you, the simple wedding band on your finger, all personal belongings, every last scrap of identity, are ripped from you. You feel the sudden, stark emptiness of your pockets, the weight of the loss pressing down, even your clothes, the last vestige of your former life, are taken. You stand exposed, vulnerable, clad only in your skin, shivering in the cold. Next, the ultimate act of public humiliation and erasure head shaving. You are pushed forward, a rough hand gripping your head, and you feel the cold, sharp bite of the clippers, the sound of your hair falling to the ground. A symbolic severing of your past is surprisingly loud in your ears. Your scalp feels raw, exposed. Then, the communal showers. You are forced into a large room with dozens of others, naked, exposed, under the watchful, sneering eyes of the SS guards. The water, if it comes, is either scalding hot or icy cold. But the experience is not about cleanliness. It is about shame, about vulnerability, about breaking you down until you are nothing more than a statistic. You feel the eyes on you, the whispers, the fear. This is where your humanity is deliberately, systematically stripped away, piece by piece. Finally, the uniform. You are handed a thin, ill-fitting, striped uniform. It is scratchy against your skin, a stark visual representation of your new reality. And then, the number. A piece of fabric, perhaps crudely stitched, perhaps neatly embroidered, bearing a sequence of digits. This number is sewn onto your uniform, sometimes tattooed onto your arm. You are no longer given a name. You are assigned a number. You feel the permanence of it, the chilling realization that your identity has been reduced to a cipher. You are not a person, but a unit, a thing, an interchangeable part in this vast, terrifying machine. You stand there, a ghost of your former self, ready to be absorbed into the chilling routine that awaits. As you settle into this new, horrifying existence, time begins to lose its meaning, measured only by the brutal, relentless rhythm of the camp. Every day begins the same way, a jarring, unwelcome intrusion into the brief oblivion of sleep. The wake-up call rips through the stillness of the barracks between 4 Hulmeru and 4:30 a.m. It's a harsh, metallic clang, or the shrill whistle of a guard, echoing through the cold, damp air. You are jolted awake, your body still heavy with exhaustion, your mind struggling to escape the nightmares that cling to you like a shroud. You have precisely 30 minutes. 30 minutes to perform the most basic human functions. You stumble out of your bunk, perhaps a wooden slab, perhaps straw-filled, and join the shuffling line. You feel the cold air on your bare skin as you try to wash in freezing water. If water is even available, a quick splash to your face, a futile attempt to scrub away the grime. Then, to dress. Your thin, striped uniform, already stiff with dirt and sweat, feels like a second skin of misery. And then, to eat. This is perhaps the cruelest joke of all. Breakfast is a minimal affair, a meager offering that mocks your gnawing hunger. You hold a dented tin bowl, perhaps, receiving a ladle full of thin, watery soup, or a sliver of stale, rock-hard bread. You eat quickly, silently, every crumb precious, every swallow a battle against the rising nausea. You feel the emptiness in your stomach, a hollow ache that will persist throughout the day. The most dreaded part of the morning ritual is the roll call. You are marched outside, regardless of the weather, rain, snow, biting wind, or scorching sun. You stand, in rows, for hours. You feel the cold seep into your bones, the sun burn your scalp, the rain plaster your uniform to your skin. The purpose of this wasn't just to count, it was to break your spirit. You stand absolutely still, no talking, no fidgeting, under the hawk-like gaze of the SS guards. They walk up and down the lines, their faces impassive, their boots crunching on the gravel. Every minute stretches into an eternity. Evenings bring another roll call, often prolonged, intentionally extended to inflict maximum psychological torture. You stand, shivering, exhausted, as the darkness descends, feeling your body scream for rest, your mind fighting to retain some shred of dignity. The guards might make you stand for hours, just to count and recount, for no other reason than to assert their absolute power, to grind your will into dust. You witness the weak collapsing, the ill being dragged away, and the terrifying silence that follows. Finally, a faint signal, a whisper of reprieve. Lights out at 9:00 p.m. You shuffle back into the barracks, the air heavy with the collective sigh of exhaustion. You crawl into your bunk, surrounded by the quiet sounds of suffering, the soft coughs, the murmured prayers, the restless turning. You feel the scratch of the lice crawling on your skin, the dampness of the straw. Sleep comes fitfully, an uneasy truce with the filth and the insects that infest your meager sleeping space. Yet, despite the grime, the hunger, the constant threat, your body demands rest, a brief escape into unconsciousness before the brutal cadence of cruelty begins anew with the next dawn. Each day a repetition, a grinding down of the spirit, until nothing is left but the raw will to survive. Beyond the rigid daily routine, you discover a deeper layer of torment, one woven from constant fear and the arbitrary exercise of power. Every moment is a tightrope walk over an unseen abyss. Even the slightest perceived slowness, a momentary lapse in attention, or an innocent misstep can trigger a horrifying response. You witness it again and again, the sudden, brutal lash of a whip, the dull thud of a fist connecting with flesh, the chilling scream that is instantly stifled. Beatings are a daily occurrence, a casual display of dominance meant to instill absolute terror and obedience. You feel the phantom pain in your own body, a sympathetic tremor, even as you force your eyes away, praying silently that you are not next. When it's time for work details, the humiliation deepens. You are marched out, a ragged column of humanity, often forced to sing songs. But these aren't songs of hope or defiance. No, you are compelled to sing vile, insulting songs about yourselves, about your supposed inferiority, about your own degradation. Your voice, weak and reedy, joins the chorus of self-condemnation. You feel the shame burning in your cheeks, the bitter taste in your mouth, as you are made to participate in your own psychological torment. It is a perversion of joy, a further stripping away of your inherent worth. The guards, their faces contorted in sneers, derive sadistic pleasure from this spectacle, their laughter echoing in the cold air. The concept of free time in this place is a cruel paradox. It exists only in name, a mockery of what freedom truly means. When the day's grueling forced labor finally ends, and you are allowed to return to the barracks, your body is a vessel of screaming agony. You feel the overwhelming exhaustion in every fiber of your being, a profound weariness that settles deep into your bones. Most prisoners simply collapse, unable to do anything more than lie still, staring blankly at the rough wooden ceiling. Those with a sliver of remaining energy engage in quiet, desperate bartering. You might witness a hushed exchange, a sliver of stale bread traded for a slightly larger portion of soup, a worn button exchanged for a chance to rest on a slightly less crowded spot. Every scrap, every morsel, every moment of relief is fiercely contested, a testament to the primal fight for survival. But even in these moments, there is no true peace. The physical and psychological torture never truly ceases. It merely shifts forms. The guards, with their absolute power, operate entirely at their whim. A sudden slap for no reason. A public humiliation for an imagined offense. An hour-long punishment drill in the freezing cold for the slightest infraction. You live in a constant state of hypervigilance, your senses heightened, always anticipating the next blow, the next act of cruelty. You feel the tightening knot of fear in your stomach, a constant companion. The unspoken agony of the camp is not just the hunger or the cold, but the ever-present threat, the complete erosion of safety, the crushing knowledge that your life, your dignity, your very existence, rests on the capricious whims of your tormentors. Each day is a testament to the enduring human capacity for suffering and the terrifying depths of human depravity. You observe a chilling evolution in the camp system, a gradual expansion of its reach, as if a great, dark net is being cast wider and wider, ensnaring more and more categories of human beings. In the earliest days, 1933, the targets were relatively clear: the political opponents. You see the communist agitators, the social democrats, the intellectuals who dared to speak against the new regime. Their crime was dissent, the quiet rebellion of thought. They were the first, the troublemakers, removed from society to set an example. But the appetite for control, you notice, is insatiable. By 1934, the net widens to encompass those deemed asocials. This is a vague, terrifying category, designed to sweep up anyone who didn't fit the rigid societal mold. You see the Roma, a people whose nomadic existence challenged fixed borders and identities. You see individuals labeled as LGBTQ+. Their very existence deemed an affront to the purity of the state. The homeless, the work-shy, anyone deemed unproductive or a burden, are also caught. Even prostitutes, marginalized and vulnerable, are rounded up. You feel a cold dread as you realize the arbitrary nature of this definition. How easily any difference can be weaponized, turning you into an undesirable. Then, in 1935, another group is added, seemingly innocuous, yet holding deep convictions: Jehovah's Witnesses and conscientious objectors. Their refusal to pledge allegiance to the state, their pacifist beliefs, mark them as enemies. You see their quiet, dignified resistance, their unwavering faith often clashing with the brutal reality of the camp. By 1937, the criteria expand further, chillingly encompassing anyone with a prior criminal conviction, regardless of the offense. A petty thief, a man who once spent a week in jail for a minor misdemeanor years ago, Now he too is deemed unfit, swept into the growing abyss. The past becomes a weapon, a permanent stain that justifies imprisonment. And then, the most tragic, most systematic expansion of all begins in 1938. You watch, with a heavy heart, as Jewish people, already suffering under hundreds of anti-Semitic laws, are increasingly targeted. After the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria, and the devastating Kristallnacht pogrom, the floodgates open. Jewish men, women, and children, previously subjected to economic and social persecution, are now systematically rounded up. Their very identity, their heritage, becomes their death sentence. You see the fear in their eyes, the quiet resignation as they are forced from their homes, their businesses, their lives, into the cattle cars, into the camps. The net grows wider and wider still, until it threatens to consume all of Europe. You perceive the underlying pattern, a systematic dehumanization, a relentless drive to eliminate anyone deemed other, anyone who did not conform, anyone who posed even a theoretical threat to the regime's vision of a homogeneous, compliant society. Each new category added to the list is a chilling step closer to the ultimate, unimaginable horror, a precursor to the final, total solution. You realize, with a sickening clarity, that no one is truly safe when the definition of undesirable becomes so broad, so fluid, so easily applied to anyone at the whim of absolute power. Imagine a world where your very identity, your reason for suffering, is broadcast for all to see, emblazoned on your uniform. This is the reality you now inhabit. After being stripped of your name, you are assigned a number. But there is another mark, a triangle of colored cloth, sewn onto your striped uniform, a grim badge of your condemnation. You feel its scratchy presence against your chest, a constant, tangible reminder of your designated category in this brutal hierarchy. Each color, each shape, whispers a different story of persecution. You notice, with a profound sense of sadness, the double yellow triangles. When sewn together, they form a Star of David. This mark is reserved exclusively for Jewish prisoners. You see it on the chests of men, women, and children, a stark, undeniable symbol of the regime's ultimate target. It is a symbol that once represented pride and heritage, now twisted into a mark of doom. You feel the weight of centuries of hatred condensed into this simple yellow shape. Then, there are the brown triangles. These are assigned to the Roma, often labeled gypsies by their oppressors. You see them on individuals whose families have wandered for generations, their vibrant culture now reduced to a single, somber hue on a drab uniform. It is a quiet testament to their persecution, a mark of their otherness in the eyes of the regime. The pink triangles stand out with a shocking, almost defiant, brightness against the dull stripes. These are for homosexual men. You see the shame, the fear, the desperate attempts to hide this visible badge of their orientation, knowing that it often subjected them to even more brutal treatment than others. It is a poignant reminder of lives targeted for simply loving differently. You observe the purple triangles, a quieter, more resilient group, the Jehovah's Witnesses. Their steadfast refusal to compromise their faith, their refusal to salute the flag or participate in the war effort, marks them with this unique color. You often see them carrying themselves with a stoic dignity, their faith an internal fortress against the external despair. The red triangle, you learn, is for political prisoners. This was the earliest mark, the original criminals of the regime. You see them on the chests of communists, social democrats, and other dissidents, those who dared to hold opposing views. It is a color of defiance, yet also of extreme danger. And finally, the black triangle. This is the mark for asocials, a vast, dehumanizing category that encompasses the homeless, the work-shy prostitutes, and others deemed unproductive or morally degenerate. You see it on individuals whose only crime was not fitting neatly into the regime's oppressive vision of society. Sometimes, you notice, two triangles are worn together, forming a complex star. A Jewish political prisoner might wear a yellow star overlaid with a red triangle, signaling a double, even triple, layer of persecution. You realize that these badges are not just identification. They are tools of degradation, a public announcement of a person's supposed inferiority, their worthlessness in the eyes of their captors. You feel the chilling power of these simple fabric shapes, how they define existence, dictate treatment, and ultimately, often foreshadow fate. They are a silent, haunting testament to a system that sought to categorize, to divide, and ultimately, to destroy. The air is thick with the dust of relentless labor, the rhythmic clang of tools, the grunts of exertion. You find yourself absorbed into a new, brutal reality, the forced labor camps. From 1937 onwards, the system of incarceration transforms even more explicitly into a system of exploitation. The prisoners are no longer just incarcerated. They are chattel, resources to be worked until they break, until their bodies give out. You see the gaunt figures, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat, their movements slow and deliberate, each step a struggle. You hear the harsh, guttural commands, urging you and those around you to push harder, move faster. You feel the constant ache in your muscles, the burning in your lungs as you haul heavy loads, dig endless ditches, or construct factories for the war machine. These aren't just camps of punishment. They are engines of production, fueled by human suffering. You learn of the categories: the Osterbeiter, the Eastern workers, predominantly from the Soviet Union and Poland, their faces etched with a profound despair. Then there are the Fremdarbeiter, the foreign workers, often abducted from occupied territories across Europe. These are not willing laborers, they are slaves, their freedom stolen, their lives reduced to a daily grind of physical exertion. Over 14 million forced laborers suffered under this brutal system. You witness the insidious, slow death by starvation and disease. The caloric intake is barely enough to sustain life, let alone heavy labor. You feel the hunger gnawing at your insides, a constant, debilitating presence. Diseases, rampant due to poor sanitation and weakened immune systems, sweep through the camps with devastating speed. You hear the endless coughs, the moans of the sick, the quiet whimpers of those who simply cannot continue. Medical care, as before, is virtually non-existent or cruelly inadequate. You realize that the work itself is a form of torture, designed not for productivity alone, but to exhaust, to debilitate, to ultimately eliminate. Beyond the forced labor camps, you observe the existence of prisoner of war POW camps, where even the established rules of warfare are contemptuously disregarded. The 1929 Geneva Convention, an international agreement meant to protect captured soldiers, is utterly ignored. You see the horrific conditions: starvation, exposure, summary executions. The treatment of Soviet and Polish POWs is especially brutal, a horrifying testament to the regime's racist ideology. Their Slavic heritage marks them for particular cruelty, deemed subhuman and unworthy of even the most basic protections. And then, there are the transit camps. You witness the brief, terrifying stopovers in occupied territories. Places where civilians are held temporarily, herded into crowded, unsanitary conditions, their fate hanging precariously in the balance. You see the families huddled together, their eyes wide with fear, knowing that this temporary stop is merely a prelude to a more permanent and terrifying deportation. These camps are conveyor belts of humanity, processing centers before the final, chilling destination. You feel the relentless, systematic nature of it all. A vast machinery designed to consume lives, to crush spirits, and to exploit bodies until nothing but ashes remain. The very ground beneath your feet feels heavy with the silent screams of those who labored, starved, and died under this monstrous, dehumanizing system. The air grows heavy, thick with an unbearable, acrid stench that chills you to the very core. You approach the ultimate horror, the unspeakable nadir of human cruelty, the extermination camps. These are not merely places of incarceration or forced labor, but factories of death, built with a single, terrifying purpose. The transition from brutal neglect to outright, systematic murder begins subtly, chillingly. You learn of Chelmno, starting its grim work in December 1941, the first to use gas vans, portable chambers of death. You can almost hear the rumble of the engines, the muffled screams, the chilling silence that follows. Then, the names echo in your mind, each one a monument to unimaginable suffering: Auschwitz, Belzec, Sobibor, Majdanek, Treblinka, Chelmno. These are the 6 major death camps, their very names now synonymous with genocide. You perceive the scale, the horrifying efficiency with which life was extinguished. Imagine the endless train tracks leading directly into these sites. The trains arriving, day after day, packed with men, women, and children. You witness the terrible sorting, the brutal selection. Over 3 million human beings were murdered almost immediately upon arrival, deemed unfit for even temporary labor. Their journey ended the moment they stepped from the train, led directly to their deaths. Those who survived the initial selection were condemned to a different kind of hell. You see them, skeletal figures, forced to become complicit in their own annihilation. They are tasked with sorting the belongings of the murdered, the piles of spectacles, the mountains of shoes, the tangled hair, the discarded clothing. You feel the chilling presence of these remnants, each item a silent scream. Or they are forced into labor, digging mass graves, tending to the crematoria, their bodies and souls slowly consumed by the smoke and the horror. You hear the constant, low hum of the furnaces, a sound that will forever haunt your deepest memories, a testament to the destruction of millions. The final tally is a number that stuns the mind, a testament to an organized, industrial-scale annihilation. You carry the weight of this knowledge: approximately 6 million Jewish people. A vast ocean of lives extinguished, families erased, cultures annihilated, and they were not alone. 250,000 to 500,000 Roma, their ancient heritage brutally extinguished. 1.8 million Poles, their nation systematically decimated. 7 million Soviet civilians, victims of a war of extermination. These numbers are not mere statistics. They represent individual lives, vibrant and complex, reduced to a chilling calculation of death. As you step away from this ultimate darkness, you feel the profound, indelible legacy of the SS camp system. It stands as humanity's darkest lesson, a chilling warning that resonates through time. It is a stark reminder of the fragility of civilization, the ease with which hatred can be systematized, and the terrifying consequences when indifference triumphs over empathy. You carry these echoes with you, a somber understanding that the whispers of dissent, the widening net of intolerance, the gradual stripping away of dignity, can lead, inexorably, to an abyss of unimaginable horror. And in that quiet, haunting knowledge, you find a solemn call to remember, to witness, and to ensure that such darkness never again casts its shadow over the dawn. On July the 6th, 1940, in Berlin, Adolf Hitler celebrated his victory in Europe. His army chief called him the greatest warlord in history from Moscow. Hitler's collaborator, the Russian leader Joseph Stalin, had sent his congratulations in London. The British Prime Minister Winston Churchill was isolated in Washington. The American President Franklin Roosevelt stood aloof in the coming 5 years. Everything in the relationship between these four men would change in ways that seemed unimaginable. While their nations fought a war of weapons, these four great warlords of the 20th century fought a war of the mind. What started as a European war has developed into a war for world domination. At the heart of this private war was a series of psychological duels in which they lied, schemed, charmed, flattered, and deceived to win. Was curious was that these duels took place not between enemies, but between men who at the time were allies. Yet their behavior was egotistic, tempestuous, monstrous, and politically. Despite the rosy glow in which some are seen today, always selfish, we shall never cease the duels of the warlords, decided the strategy for the greatest battles in history. They were also the epicenter of a seismic shift in world power. From the age of European empires to the age of two ideologically opposed superpowers, with devastating consequences for hundreds of millions of people over Salzburg, in southern Germany, one of the world's loveliest places. It was here in August 1939 that Adolf Hitler was thinking the unthinkable. Hitler had set his heart on invading Poland, and his generals had told him he must attack before the autumn rains came. But Britain and France had said they would go to war for Poland. One thing stood in Hitler's way, the fear that Russia would also turn against him and propel him into a war on two fronts. This was the very thing imprinted in Hitler's mind as having helped to lose Germany the First World War 20 years before. There was only one way out, a pact with his greatest ideological enemy, Joseph Stalin Hitler, put out feelers to Moscow. Though he little realized it, he was instigating a mental duel with Stalin, which over the next 2 years would decide the destiny of the Second World War. Stalin was deeply suspicious of Hitler's approach. He spent hours reading Mein Kampf, written 15 years before, underlining key passages like Hitler's views of the Bolshevik leaders. Men such as Stalin himself never forget that the rulers of present-day Russia are common blood-stained criminals, that they are the scum of humanity. But Stalin could see that Hitler was now desperate for a deal and offering to send his foreign minister Ribbentrop to Moscow. Stalin decided he would go with Hitler. Hitler's propaganda chief, Joseph Goebbels, noted in his diary, 2nd of August 1939, non-aggression pact with Moscow. Perfect Ribbentrop in Moscow on Wednesday. That is something we're on top again. Now we can sleep more easily on August the 23rd. Ribbentrop landed in Moscow, but Hitler needed one piece of reassurance. He sent his personal photographer Heinrich Hoffmann to film Stalin's earlobes to see whether they were ingrown and Jewish or separate and Aryan. They were separate. Stalin passed Hitler's test shortly after midnight on August 24, 1939. The Nazi-Soviet pact was signed, and with it a secret protocol, under which Germany and Russia would carve Poland into two. Hitler phoned Ribbentrop, "This will hit like a bombshell." But as Goebbels noted, it was not strength but fear of Stalin knifing him in the back that had forced Hitler into history's biggest U-turn. The Führer believes he's in the position of scrounging for favors, and beggars can't be choosers in times of famine. The devil feeds on flies in the Kremlin. Stalin proposed a toast. "I know how much the German nation loves its Führer. I should therefore like to drink his health." But like Hitler, Stalin was also acting from fear that Hitler would attack him that evening. He told his inner circle, "Of course, it's all a game too. See who can fool whom he thinks he's outsmarted me. But actually, it's I who's tricked him." Stalin had found a bedfellow for whose cunning he had held a long and sneaking admiration back in 1934. Stalin had observed Hitler eliminated rivals within the Nazi Party in the so-called Night of the Long Knives. He remarked, "Did you hear what happened in Germany? Some fellow that Hitler splendid? That's a deed of some skill." Hitler had felt no such mutual admiration in his early years in power. He was set on the dreams of Mein Kampf and alliance with Britain's Sea Empire, while he expanded to the east and built his German land empire on the continent. Only when that plan had clearly failed did Hitler begin to see in Stalin someone he might do business with. Stalin was the first of the two to be a mass murderer. His terrors killed millions. He once compared his victims with the boyar landowners massacred by Ivan the Terrible 400 years before. Who's going to remember all this riffraff in 10 or 20 years' time? No. One who remembers the names now of the boyars. Ivan the Terrible got rid of no one. A week before he invaded Poland, Hitler made an eerily similar remark to his generals. Genghis Khan had millions of men and women. Killed by his own will and with a gay heart, history sees him only as a great state builder, and who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians. For both men, mass murder was just another weapon in the ideological struggle. The state, whether communist or Nazi, was supreme. Individuals were its disposable tools. They even extended this idea to their domestic lives. Hitler had secret mistresses, most notably Eva Braun. But in public, no woman could come between him and his nation. One of his secretaries recalled that he emphasized again and again, "My lover is Germany." Stalin did marry twice and had children, but the suicide of his second wife Nadia in 1932 further brutalized him. Echoing Hitler, he told an associate a true Bolshevik shouldn't and couldn't have a family because he should give himself wholly to the party. Stalin told his son Vasily, "I'm not Stalin. Stalin is Soviet power now." In August 1939, these two great ideologically opposed warlords were inextricably linked. 8 days after the signing of the pact, Hitler invaded Poland. Britain declared war. Winston Churchill rejoined the British cabinet. Stalin publicly supported his Nazi collaborator. He told the world, "It is not Germany who has attacked England and France, but England and France who have attacked Germany." The enslavement of Poland further united the two extreme proponents of totalitarian violence. SS units killed 60,000 Jews and members of the Polish ruling class. It was Hitler's first experience of mass murder and profoundly influenced him. It showed him his followers would actually do it as Stalin's secret police. The NKVD, long versed in mass killing, would carry out similar massacres in the east of Poland. Among their victims were more than 20,000 Polish officers and political prisoners whose bodies would be discovered 3 years later as their secret police mutilated Poland. The two dictators faced their destinies hand in hand over the next 2 years in a mind war unparalleled in world history. They would both become gripped by a series of delusions that would lead them into colossal error, and the bloodiest conflict there has ever been. Stalin had entered his pact with Hitler with open eyes. He never doubted he was something with the devil, but he believed the pact would give the Soviet Union both protection and opportunity. Just a week after the Nazis invaded Poland, he told his inner circle a war is on between two groups of capitalist countries. Hitler, without understanding it or desiring it, is shaking and undermining the capitalist system. We can maneuver pit one side against the other to set them fighting with each other as fiercely as possible. Stalin was also eyeing up a further desirable outcome: the chance to expand his communist empire. What would be the harm if, as a result of the root of Poland, we were to extend the socialist system onto new territories and populations? For Hitler, the pact also opened the door to conquest. He could now turn all his energy and attention to planning the invasion of France. Joseph Goebbels noted Hitler's hopes for a long-term collaboration with Stalin, 1st of October 1939. Conference with the fire in private, he is convinced of Russia's loyalty, after all. Stalin is set to pocket a huge profit. But Stalin saw no such loyalty in Hitler. Mein Kampf was etched in his mind, above all Hitler's youthful ambitions to conquer Russian territory for the new German Reich. If we speak of territory in Europe today, we can primarily have in mind only Russia and her vassal border states. Because he calculated that Hitler might still one day turn on him, Stalin set out to build a line of buffer zones to protect himself against possible Nazi attack. He forced the Baltic states, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia to accept Russian garrisons. He told a Latvian delegation, "There has been an unexpected turn, but one cannot rely upon it. We must be prepared in time." Others who were not prepared paid for it. The Germans might attack Stalin. Also tried to bully Finland into giving him a swath of territory as a further buffer. The Finns refused. Stalin invaded their country. It was a disaster. Within days, thousands of frozen Russian corpses littered the snow. Finally, the Finns were beaten, but not before killing 125,000 Russian soldiers. Stalin sent in his political commissars to shoot the Soviet commanders. But the real fault was his own. His terror had got rid of the Red Army's best officers. As Goebbels noted, the Red Army's incompetence offered Hitler yet more comfort. 15th of March, 1940. The Russians can never become dangerous for us. If Stalin shoots his own generals, we won't need to do it so far. We've had nothing but advantages from our alliance with Russia on May the 10th. 10th, 1940, Hitler, with his Eastern Front secured by Stalin, launched his blitzkrieg to the west. The German army sliced through France, Belgium, and Holland. The British were driven from the continent for Hitler. It was a triumph, a Stalin, a disaster. Nikita Khrushchev, later Russia's prime minister, recalled Stalin's reaction to Hitler's lightning victories. "I remember being with Stalin. He was extremely nervous. He was racing around, cursing like a cab driver. He cursed the French. He cursed the English. How could they allow Hitler to defeat them, to crush them?" Stalin not only saw the superiority of the German army, he knew that the Germans sensed our weakness because of the war we had fought with Finland on June the 17th, 1940. The French government sued for peace. The long-lasting and mutually destructive war of the capitalist and fascist states, which Stalin had so gleefully anticipated, was over in a trice the next day, as Hitler celebrated in Munich with the Italian dictator Mussolini. Stalin, with gritted teeth, sent his congratulations on the Via Mark's splendid success for Hitler victory. Had lanced a boil. Germany's defeat in the First World War had been avenged. Now, for the first time in his political life, he wanted a rest from conquest and reverting to his old instincts. Peace with Britain, the Italian foreign minister, Calgagliozociano, was also in Munich. And observed Hitler's state of mind, Italy makes many reservations on the desert ability of dismantling the British Empire, which he considers even today to be an important factor in world equilibrium. Hitler is now like the gambler who, having made a big win, would like to leave the table risking nothing more. But Stalin feared that Hitler, having won his victory in the West, might immediately be tempted by his long-held ambition of expanding to the East. Stalin now embarked on a hugely risky double strategy, going on a 10-day land grab to expand and protect his empire. While also trying not to provoke Hitler, he occupied the Baltic states and Bessarabia, the northern province of Romania. This was allowed under the Nazi-Soviet pact. But he also decided to invade another Romanian province, Bukovina. It was not assigned to Stalin under the pact. Hitler's chief of staff, General Franz Halder, noted Hitler's alarm in his diary. 25th of June 1940. The issue of Bukovina raised by Russia is new and goes beyond our agreements with the Russians at precisely this moment. Stalin's duel with Hitler took a second unexpected twist. The Soviet leader received his first letter from Winston Churchill, who'd become British Prime Minister on the day Hitler launched his blitzkrieg. It was an appeal to Stalin to beware of Hitler and come over to Britain's side. Stalin did not reply, instead to show Hitler his loyalty. He reported Churchill's approach to Berlin. Hitler now began to make his own interpretation of these two pieces of evidence: Stalin's opacity in Romania and Churchill's approach before the war. Hitler had described to his adjutant his secretive mental processes. Bear in mind that my brain works like a calculating machine. Each person who makes a presentation to me introduces into this calculating machine a small wheel of information. There forms a certain picture or a number on each wheel. I press a button, and there flashes into my mind the sum of all this information. Now the Hitler calculating machine began to build a conspiracy theory, which would have devastating consequences on July the 6th, 1940. Hitler, the victor in Europe, returned to Berlin to a hero's welcome. Our wonderful July sun shines all over the place. An unimaginable ecstasy fills the city. The crowd roars. The station looks like a great banqueting hall. Then the fire arrives. A roar of joy fills the station. On this day, Hitler's army chief, General Keitel, called him the greatest warlord in history. But amid his triumph, Hitler was increasingly tormented by one overriding thought. As far as he was concerned, he had won the war. So why did the British not recognize that fact and make peace with him? He began to convince himself that there must be some external factor that Britain and Churchill were relying on. A week after the Day of Glory in Berlin, General Halder recorded a momentous development in Hitler's reasoning. 13th of July, 1940. The Führer is greatly puzzled by Britain's persistent unwillingness to make peace. He sees the answer in Britain's hope in Russia. On July the 19th, 1940, in a speech to the Reichstag, Hitler made his final plea for peace. To Britain, Churchill and the British were not interested. Later that day, a further wheel of information from the United States entered Hitler's mind. Franklin Roosevelt was nominated by the Democrat Party to run for president for the third time. His acceptance speech contained an attack on Nazi aggression. Hitler was now seeing specters across the globe. 22nd of July, 1940. Führer's view: reasons for continuation of war by Britain. 1. It hopes for a change in America. 2. It puts hope in Russia. Stalin is flirting with Britain to keep her in the war and tie us down. Hitler retreated to the mountains of Obersalzberg. The delusion was building here the summer before. He'd been dreaming up his pact with Stalin. Now he suspected him. At the end of July, he announced to his generals the result of weeks of agonized reflection. 31st of July, 1940, 11:30. Berkoff Führer concludes: Russia is the factor on which Britain is relying the most. Something must have happened in London. The British were completely down. Now they have perked up again. With Russia smashed, Britain's last hope would be shattered. The sooner Russia is crushed, the better. If we were to start in May 1941, we would have 5 months to finish the job. It was as yet only an idea, but two enormous delusions. The first, that he had already won the war, and the second, that some secret deal was brewing between Britain and Russia, were leading Hitler down the road to catastrophe. For Hitler, the invasion of Russia was still only a contingency plan, should all other means of forcing the British to make peace fail. The autumn of 1940 now brought 4 long months of frustration. The RAF defeated the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. Plans for a cross-channel invasion were quietly shelved. Yet despite these setbacks, Hitler kidded himself that he'd done enough. 15th of October 1940. Führer: on military situation, war is won. Rest is mere question of time. But Hitler could still not force the British to come to terms, and he had become split-minded about Russia, moving troops nearer her borders, but also wanting Stalin to join him in the fight against Britain. Hitler's adjutant Major Gerhard Engel noted in his diary, 4th of November 1940, "Fewer visibly depressed." He conveys the impression that at the moment, he does not know how things should proceed. Then came the defining moment on November the 12th, 1940. The Russian Foreign Minister, Vyacheslav Molotov, arrived in Berlin at Hitler's invitation. Molotov was given the full Nazi fanfare, but the conversations that followed were tense. Hitler's purpose in summoning Molotov was to offer Russia a share in the spoils of victory if it helped him finish off the British. He told him England's final capitulation is just a matter of time. Fragments of its empire will be left all over the world. It's time to think about the vision of this property without a master after our victory. But Stalin wasn't interested in joining Hitler's war or speculative carve-ups of the British Empire. His instructions to Molotov were to find out what Hitler's troops were up to in Finland and Romania. Places right on his doorstep, Molotov put the questions bluntly. Hitler gave vague reassurances, despite the superficial courtesies. Molotov's cold arrogance and his needling on the question of territory in Eastern Europe infuriated Hitler, and it reinvigorated him. 15th of November 1940. The talks had shown where the Russian plans were heading. Molotov had left the cat out of the bag. Führer was really relieved. It would not even remain a marriage of convenience when Molotov reported back to Moscow on the talks in Berlin as Stalin realized that Hitler was turning against him. In early December, he told his generals, "We know that Hitler is intoxicated by his victories and believes that the Red Army will need at least 4 years to prepare for war." Obviously, 4 years would be more than enough for us, but we must be ready much earlier. We will try to delay the war for another 2 years, but Hitler was moving at a pace Stalin could not imagine. On December the 18th, 1940, he issued War Directive Number 23. The German Vermont must be prepared before the ending of the war against England to crush Soviet Russia in a rapid campaign. The invasion date was set for May 1941. But behind the order lay uncertainty. 10th of December 1940. I'm convinced that the Führer himself does not know how it would turn out. He's very concerned at the lack of clarity as regards the strength of the Russians. Hopes for an English surrender does not think America will enter the war. Hitler had finally made the momentous decision, a war on 2 fronts. The very thing he'd sought to avoid when he first made his pact with Stalin. But he deluded himself. That one front Britain was already won, it simply required a knockout blow against Russia for the British to understand their defeat. Hitler's line of reasoning never began to occur to Stalin. He believed that Hitler either had to beat Churchill or make a deal with him before he could think of turning against Russia in early 1941. He told Politburo members, "We must cherish no illusions. Fascist Germany is clearly preparing for an attack on the Soviet Union. Why does Hitler want to make an agreement with England? Because he wants to avoid war on 2 fronts. Stalin was trusting Hitler to act rationally and to fight Britain and Russia. At the same time was clearly irrational, but Stalin failed to realize that despite their similarities, there was one profound difference between him and Hitler, which made his perfect logic irrelevant. He himself was a methodical, calculating, hard-working man, a master of detail, personally signing death lists at one extreme and at the other, keeping the tiniest details of gold production in his notebook. Hitler, by contrast, was at heart an idle dreamer. He once described why he'd loved the mountains of Obersalzberg. "When I go to Obersalzberg, I'm not drawn there merely by the beauty of the landscape. I feel myself far from petty things. My imagination is stimulated when I study a problem. Elsewhere, I see it less clearly. I'm submerged by the details. By night at the Bear Cove, I often remain for hours with my eyes open, contemplating from my bed mountains lit up by the moon. It's at such moments that brightness enters my mind." For Hitler, the big idea was never to be disrupted by small facts and having made up his mind to attack Russia for tactical reasons. The original and biggest idea of all was reasserting itself: the ideological struggle against Jews and Bolsheviks. Throughout 1940, Hitler had hardly mentioned the Jews. But on January the 30th, 1941, in his traditional speech, marking the anniversary of the Nazis' rise to power, he repeated a chilling threat he'd first made before war broke out. At a series of conferences with his generals in the spring of 1941, Hitler made his aims brutally clear. 3rd of March, 1941. The forthcoming campaign will lead to a showdown between two different ideologies. The Jewish Bolshevik intelligentsia must be eliminated. 30th of March. We must forget the concept of comradeship between soldiers. This is war of extermination. While Hitler planned his annihilation, Stalin still believed he had at least a year to prepare. On April the 13th, 1941, he moved to protect his back, signing a pact with Hitler's ally. Stalin was thrilled with his coup and got happily tipsy with the Japanese foreign minister, Matsuoki. But he was still following his double strategy as he said goodbye to Matsuoki. The German military attaché in Moscow was present, Stalin told him. "We must remain friends, and you must now do everything to that end. We will stay friends with you, whatever happens," but Stalin knew such long-term friendship was a fantasy. Soon after, he told graduates of Moscow's military academy, "There will be war, and the enemy will be Germany." But that war would not happen yet. Up until this point, Stalin's reasoning was irreproachable. He'd foreseen the eventual conflict with Germany and was steadily preparing for it. But a bizarre twist would now propel him into his own huge delusion. In April 1941, Stalin received his second letter from Winston Churchill. Like the first, it would have an electrifying effect on his duel with Hitler. Churchill told him the British had received intelligent reports of German troop movements which could only be preparations for a Nazi attack on Russia. Stalin was instantly suspicious, not of Hitler, but of Churchill. He told his army chiefs, "Britain is threatening us with the Germans and threatening the Germans with the Soviet Union. They're playing us off against each other." Then on May the 10th, 1941, in one of the war's strangest moments, Hitler's deputy Rudolf Hess took off from Germany, and a Messerschmitt fighter flew across the North Sea and parachuted to the ground in Scotland. At that time, Stalin's assistant present at his key meetings was Yuri Chedaya, who noted down and later typed up everything Stalin said. From Chedayev's secret unpublished record, it is possible to piece together how Churchill's message and Hess's flight began to lead Stalin towards the conspiracy theory, which would have immensely destructive consequences for his country. 3 days after Hess landed, Chedayev recorded the interpretation Stalin gave at these two events. On the one hand, Churchill sends us a personal message in which he warns us about Hitler's aggressive intentions, and on the other hand, the British meet Hess, who is undoubtedly Hitler's confidant. What is the conclusion? Then apparently, when Churchill sent us his personal warning, he believed that we would activate our military machine. Then Hitler would have a direct and fair reason to launch a preventive crusade against the Soviet Union. In Stalin's eyes, Churchill's warning was deliberately designed to provoke a war between Germany and Russia. And Churchill was meeting Hess to tell Germany it should strike first. As he brooded on this idea, Stalin concluded that Churchill was not the only provocateur on June the 5th. He told his military chiefs England, France, and America see in Germany the only hope to get rid of Bolshevism, and therefore help the Nazis in all possible ways. In their crusade to the east, this deduction that the democratic nations of Europe and America were ganging up on him became a blinding article of faith throughout May and June. Intelligence reports gave warning after warning of imminent German attack. Stalin dismissed every one of them as part of the great conspiracy to provoke him. On June the 12th, he told his generals, "I am certain that Hitler will not risk creating a second front by attacking the Soviet Union. Hitler is not such an idiot." Millions of German troops gathered within striking distance of Russia's borders. Operation Barbarossa, as it was now called, was scheduled for 10 days' time, June the 22nd. The duel between Hitler and Stalin was reaching its endgame as Operation Barbarossa drew near. Hitler convinced himself he was fulfilling his destiny on June the 16th, 1941. With 6 days to go, he told Goebbels that which we have spent our lives fighting, we will not annihilate, whether right or wrong, we must win. And when we have won, who will ask about the method that day? A Soviet spy in the Luftwaffe sent yet another warning of imminent German attack. Stalin retorted, "Tell the source in the staff of the German Air Force," to his mother on June 18th. Stalin's two top generals, Zhukov and Timoshenko, pleaded with him. For a full alert, Stalin reminded them that Hitler could not attack without first doing a deal with Britain. You have to realize that Germany will never fight Russia on their own. You must understand this on June the 20th. 2 days to go, Hitler chose his fanfare for victory. A passage from Liszt's symphonic poem they prelude, though Stalin still refused to see it coming. It was now apparent to his closest associates that the Nazis were on their way on June the 21st, one of them. Georgy Dimitrov was in Moscow. Rumors of an impending attack are multiplying. On all sides have to be on guard. Called Molotov this morning. Molotov says the situation is unclear. There is a major game underway on June the 22nd. The same day Napoleon had once invaded Russia, Hitler followed in his footsteps at 3:30 a.m. The attack begins, the greatest deployment in world history. The Farah is as if released from a bad dream. The nearer we get to the decisive moment, all his tiredness seems to disappear. And given a deep insight into his thoughts, we have no option but to attack. This cancerous abscess must be cauterized. Stalin will fall at 7 a.m. I was urgently summoned to the Kremlin. Germany has attacked the USSR. The war has begun. Stalin to me. They attacked us without declaring any grievances, without demanding any negotiations. They attacked us viciously like gangsters. Stalin's great conspiracy theory that the democracies were plotting to provoke him was shattered. His misreading of Hitler, the man he'd viewed as a rational strategist, was total. Hitler had completed an extraordinary mental journey a year before he had seen the invasion as a tactic to make Britain crumble. Now the ideology with which he had set out 20 years before had once again taken pride of place. He wrote to his Italian ally, Benito Mussolini. "Let me say one more thing, Ducci. Since I struggled through to this decision, I again feel spiritually free. The partnership with the Soviet Union was often very irksome to me, for in some way or other it seemed to me to be a break with my whole origin, my concepts and my former obligations. I am happy now to be relieved of these mental agonies. While Operation Barbarossa cleansed Hitler, it only shocked and depressed Stalin. His fury was directed equally at Hitler and at his own generals, whose positioning of their forces, insisted upon by Stalin himself, had allowed the Germans to smash through Russian defenses. This is a monstrous crime. Those responsible must lose their heads. NKVD units were sent to the front to arrest the guilty men. The Commander General Pavlov was shot 5 days later. Stalin remarked, "Lenin founded our state, and we've it up the Red Army taken by surprise because Stalin had refused to allow it to prepare." Was in headlong retreat 2 weeks after the invasion, General Halder noted in his diary. 3rd of July 1941, it is probably no overstatement to say that the Russian campaign has been won in the space of 2 weeks. Militarily, Barbarossa turned the war on its head, and his experience with Hitler also had a vital psychological effect on Stalin. He later remarked, "When you're trying to make a decision, never put yourself into the mind of the other person, because if you do, you can make a terrible mistake." Stalin had lost the mind game. Hitler had outwitted him. But Hitler would be the eventual loser. His decision to attack Russia signed the death warrant of his own dreams, of empire and of European imperialism in general. And it would create an unlikely coalition of 3 ideologically opposed warlords to fight him. But the relationship between the 2 great democrats in that coalition began with another mental duel which ran in parallel with the duel of the dictators. It too was riddled with mutual suspicions, false promises, and evasion. It too would shape the destiny of the world.